Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Harebrained Games. Today we're going to take a look at a game called Undaunted, Battle of Britain. Now, this is the umpteenth entry into the series of Undaunted games, starting with Normandy. We went to North Africa, where we reinforced ourselves for a bit, before heading to Stalingrad, and finally here back on the shores of Great Britain, or the British Isle. This is a two-player game, not a one-player, a two-player, unless by going to two you pass one, in which case that's okay. But this is a different take because you are no longer in rectangle land. It is no longer square map terrains. Yeah, a lot of things happen that change the composition greatly, but then again, at the same time they don't. So rather than rattle on like a faulty machine gun, we're just going to dive in and take a look. Okay, let's take a look at what comes in the box of Undaunted, Battle of Britain. You get, for the first time ever in an Undaunted series, that's right, hexes. The squares are gone, man. Ain't square no more. However, to simplify things, they're not just singular hexes. They are amalgamations of hexes. So you're going to get a basically polygonal shape that contains 5 hexes. There are some that have 3 that are kind of like flush out the rectangularness of a map filled with hexes. But each of these has, on the front side, some sort of terrain indicative of whatever mission it's going to be playing on. And like any Undaunted series, you're going to mix and match these tiles to create the scenario. On the back, you're going to be featured by water. All right. And then you have those. That's the big change there. Also, you're going to notice that there are units, and these are German units, Luftwaffe, and these are the RAF units. Color schemes very similar, and over here is where we lay them out. You'll also notice that unlike previous Undaunted games, you have directional ramifications to where these are. So in the previous times, you would have the units, they'd be circular, and you just they move, they don't, it didn't matter what direction. That is different because, well, it matches the vibe of warfare in the skies, and so you have that. As well, you have some terrain. You've got these balloons, and these will mitigate. These will mess with any plane flying through it. That's bad. They will also provide a defensive bonus for trying to shoot through them to get to and attack other enemies. You've got anti-air. You've got cloud cover, you've got ships, and you've got objective tokens. That's it. It's a pretty small, terrained quantity pack, to be honest with you, but that is the name of the game. Undaunted is about simplified recreation of fun in a given theater, and that's what this does. As well, you will see the familiar cards of old. You've got the German deck, and you've got the target deck, or I mean, the RAF. And so my wife literally walked in and said, "Did you get that from Target? Why does it have the Target logo?" And no, I'm not making fun of it, but hey, that's what people who don't play war games look at and go, wow, like you need the Target dog. Anyway, this is the RAF. This is the Luftwaffe. And they have their standard cards with one tweak. In the past, you would have cards, you would play them, and there were certain situations where you would be given a sort of a palette on each card of moves. This is different, and we'll go over that in a little bit, but suffice to say there's something you always have to do with your card now, as well as something you may want to do with your card. That's what's different. And Fog of War has been replaced with Discord, which I don't know which channel to connect to get your Discord channel. Anyway, enough of that. You got the rule book, and the rule book, as usual, does a great job. I love all of these do a great job of saying, if you played Undaunted before, and I've seen this before in the series, it will tell you what's different. And this is very important because there are certain subtleties, striking like coin games, I think, where the same rule set, but just a few little tweaks can really change the composition of the game. So you got your breakdown, you got your typical rules, how to play, how not to play. And then you've got the, if you want to, advanced rule set. Kidding. And then you've got the scenario book, and the scenario book has, I believe, 12 different scenarios which you can string together in a campaign, each one taking a little bit more and adding a little bit more to the gameplay until you get to the final mission. Won't give any spoilers away, but that's what comes in the box. That's Battle of Britain. Now let's go into an example of play. Okay, we're going to do an example of the very first mission. Not going to give a bunch away because the later missions tend to get a little more exciting and add a few more things, and I don't want to spoil the fun. What fun is that? So we're going to play this one, and this is the Remember mission. No, I'm kidding. This is the Scenario 1 First Contact, and this is a great job, does a great job of laying out for you just the basic principles of the underlying system. Lots of exceptions come up later, but for now, this is what we've got. As is any Undaunted game, if you played them before, this will be familiar. If not, I will re-explain it. In your game of Undaunted, on your side, and this is a two-player game, this is two-player only, so it's you and one opponent. You have your supply of cards. These map to the ships, the airships, the airplanes that are available to you on your mission. The RAF are flying into France, and they're going to try and take out some of the Luftwaffe. And even there are some similarities. It has tripped me up, but just to let you know, Germans have a very dark gray over there, and then for the same orange unit, their RAF have sort of an off whitish. So there's at least some differentiation there to kind of help you remember which side these airplanes are on. Your supply is the full amount of cards that you're going to be able to play from your hand to be able to manipulate your forces. So you've got supply, you've got your deck. This is your starting hand of cards, which you will actively play. You will be able to pull cards from the supply into your deck over time. You have a discard pile, which we haven't begun yet, and then you'll have your hand. All right, and the same thing over the German side. You'll notice the Germans only have 4 aircraft. They've got 4 piles corresponding to the aircraft. There's also overarching cards, calm cards. These are the calm before the storm, where you are actually using these calm cards to do things at a higher level than just the plane. For example, a R card, calm card can give you, and we'll see those later, will let you add more cards to the deck from here so that you've got more opportunities for your aircraft to make moves and motions, because each of these cards represents an action that plane can take. The more cards you have of that plane in your deck coming out to your hand, the more actions you can take with them, and the less time they're going to spend inactive during your turns. At the same time, if you have too many cards in there, you can wind up having cards start, you could wind up with a bloated deck where you don't get the opportunity to really focus. One of the perfect things you can do, and this is something where I think this version of Undaunted actually kind of accentuates even more than others, is being able to have the same aircraft in your hand with 2 cards in your hand to be able to do something like move, maneuver, move, attack. Something that you have, that kind of chaining together is, I think, more critical in this game than it was in previous games of Undaunted, where, yes, you could move the same unit twice, etc., but for some reason it seems more real here, probably because of the fact that you can't just fire however you want. You've got to have line of sight. And let's talk about that now. Each of the aircraft, it's very simply demonstrated, the teardrop shape, tears of the fallen enemies that you shoot. I'm kidding, but this is the direction, and it always has to face a side. One of the sides. It can't face the apex or the vertexes. It has to face a side. Why is that? Because that's the firing line. And you'll notice a firing line here. Now notice the Defiant. This one's interesting because the Defiant has a firing line. You can't shoot straight at something with the Defiant. You have to shoot at these angles. More angle of shooting, but less, but you can't just aim and shoot like you would expect. So that's something to be mindful of. And then the number here is the difficulty it is to hit this. And this is the base number. And then you're going to add range, you're going to add cover, you're going to add, congestion because of other aircraft along in the same area on the same line. There's a set of rules and steps that we go through when we determine how many dice to roll and what number we have to achieve for it to be a hit. And this is not a game. This is not a one hit you're out game. Well, it can be if you play your cards poorly, but in general, you are going to have to wear down the enemy forces over a series of pretty hefty dogfight scenarios to get them down to the point where you can finally take a unit and neutralize them. They call them neutralizing in this game, which is effectively taking the unit out. And in fact, our objectives here are that the RAF need to neutralize 2 enemy aircraft, the Luftwaffe need 3 enemy aircraft. And again, it gets much more complicated later when you have structures to destroy, and you've got bombing missions, and you've got a whole host of other things going on. But let's go over it now. Let's just get into play. Shut up, Royal. Show them how it works. So anyway, The turns are very similar to what they were before in Undaunted. Draw 4 cards. Again, we're gonna simulate both sides this time. There's no single player for this. Well, fan-made scenarios will come up with something, I'm sure, but... Alright, so we have our 4 cards. The first thing we do is we draw 4 cards. One of these cards is going to be used for initiative. I also think that initiative here is even more critical than the other Undaunted games, and it was pretty important even back then at times. Initiative has... Yeah. I find that it's been more paramount here than previous Undaunted experiences, but the higher the card, the greater the chance that you are going to gain initiative. Default goes to the RAF per the scenario instructions. Now, what are these cards? Well, we've got this overall comms card. It's got the highest initiative. It's very unlikely. Like, if I played this card, this is the highest card, I know I'm going to get the initiative, even if my opponent plays it, because I have the initiative already, and it keeps going that way. But it also is powerful. Bolster 3 lets me add 3 of those cards to my deck, which means that I've instantly given myself 1, kind of more hit points per se, and 2, more opportunity to use an aircraft during the course of play. Guide is a kind of a funny one. Guide is new to this one, and Guide really just says, here's a little extra mini move that you can do. Command lets you draw 2 cards and play them on the same turn. So instead of playing just the subset of normal cards, you get extra cards, but you don't know what they are. And Coordinate is a way to get rid of the pesky Discord. Now, what is Discord? Discord, like Fog of War, is useless, empty, clogged decking, fun-sucking... Oh, I like that art, though. Anyway, but yeah, so this is a way to get rid of a Discord card, and you get an extra card back out of it. So that's kind of potent. Now, for the section comms, you'll notice this is only... this will only be useful on anything that's Y. So if I wanted to bolster 2 cards, I would have to only choose from the Hurricanes. I couldn't just grab any cards I want, whereas this is more of an overarching one. Card that lets me do whatever I want. Same thing. Inspire lets you reuse a card. It takes away from previous Undaunteds where they similar things. So I play a card, then I can inspire that card to be used. There's a new phenomenon here, and that is comms. Are you in comms or are you out of comms? And that's a big deal. This is where, in previous games, when you were exploring the map and you couldn't go into areas you didn't explore, you needed to move a scout, etc. That was some of the early kind of stuff. They've replaced it here because you don't really need to scout the skies as in the same way. So instead you have comms. Comm means that your aircraft units, and they usually in pairs of 2, these units need to stay close by to stay in communication. It's the typical Top Gun, don't leave your wingman, Maverick kind of thing. But it has merit here. As long as you are within 1 empty space, as long as there's only 1 empty space between you and your partner, then you're going to go ahead and be fine in using any of these cards. If you don't, if you're out of, say the Hurricane is over here having tea with his brothers, and you're over here and you want to, well, let's actually use the right units. So this is Y comms. So say for example we have him over here asking for directions or getting his Grubhub order. They're out of communications. If that happens, you can still use this card, but you have to take a Discord card. So if you get too spread out, you're out of communications, it causes discord. You can still do things, it's still possible, but you have to add discord, which is going to slow you down or interfere with your ability to communicate and effectively orchestrate your attacks. The exception is Coordinate. Coordinate has a flat out, someone is typing a message kind of icon. That means if you're not in Coordinate, if you're out of comms, you can't coordinate. Like, duh. Like, just can't do it. So, but those are new things to think about as you're playing, and they do replace the whole scouting Fog of War situation of the past. All right, so there we go. So we're gonna pick initiative. We're just for variety. We're gonna go ahead and use our comms. We're just like, I really want to go first. I have plans, big plans. And here, the German over here, He's got ideas. He's thinking he might try and go after the Defiance, but that risks getting flanked by the Hurricanes, or he might start moving over here and try to work his way around so that he's not going to wind up having to deal with two at the same time. But his cards are predominantly for that squadron, and so he feels like he could play this one. And again, this is blind, so... Or he could just play this card and get it over there and be able to do all three. He's going to do that. He's going to go like, you know what? I'm fine. I'm going to do a holding pattern right now. So then each of the combatants reveals their card. Oh, that's an 8. Who would have thought? And that's a 1. Well, gosh. And they're discarded. You don't get to use them. You anteed them up, and either way you win or lose. And that leaves... the RAF to begin, and the RAF are going to begin, and they're going to play their cards. Now, what can you do on your turn? And the cards, you can play any of these cards in any order. Pretend this is in my hand. Actually, I'm going to do over here, because there is a kind of a specific order where you play them to your play area. The reason being is that there are cards that let you like replay them and such, and that doesn't mean they're in your discard pile. So, all right, so let's do this first, and we're going to bolster, command, or guide, or coordinate. Well, let's do... If we did bolster, we would say, you know what, I got a feeling I could get these Hurricanes over and in. I'm going to focus on that. So we're going to do bolster. Bolster 3. Any 3 cards I want. So we're going to take this, discard, and... You know what? Let's go ahead and focus on the Defiant 1, because they're going to come into play. So there we go. We've just played our Squadron Comms card. All right, and then we get a chance to do the next cards. We're going to do Hurricane. So, on this turn, you have to move. Every unit has to move anytime it's played. If you play this card, you have to move. You can move after you do any of these 2 actions on the right side, but you have to move. And you have to move up to 2. You don't have to move a whole 2, but you have to move up to 2. Let's take a look at our Hurricane 2 here. So, what's he going to do? Moving is always in a straight line. That's all you get to do. However... You can attack, which there's literally nothing in his line of sight to attack. And yes, you can attack all the way across the map. It's just very unlikely. And no, you don't hit automatically on 10. So it's entirely possible that you have an unwinnable shot. You can attack, or you can maneuver. Maneuver is the only way to manipulate the rotation of and the direction of your ship. So we're going to do that. So Y2 says we're going to move 1. We always have to move first before we do anything else. I'm claiming maneuver. You have to claim it before you use it. 1. Okay. Now I can choose to maneuver up to 2 or not. So I can maneuver here. I'm not going to maneuver here. I'm going to move here for my second action, or my second part of my move, and I'm going to maneuver by rotating to this next facing. Now, what does that do? Well, it puts me stupidly in the line of sight for the other enemy over there, but it also gives me a clear shot for future turns. Now, it would have been beautiful if I'd had another one of these cards, which I could have played, and then just immediately shot. But you can't maneuver and attack, or attack and at the same time. So you're lining up a shot, but you got to wait until your next activation before you can shoot. Again, you can also, if you've already had this shot lined up, you could attack and then move, and that's a way to kind of like move and overshoot. And you can be in the same area as your enemy units. That's fine. There's no bonus for facing or whatever. And what happens when you do this? Well, we'll get into that shortly. So we played that card. Then we're going to play R1 Hurricane. Now what are we going to do? It's the same thing. Same stats. So we're going to do something different. We're going to move, and we're going to maneuver differently. We're going to move, because we always have to move 1 space forward no matter what. The only exception to that is if there's a veteran unit, then you can maneuver first and then move. And that takes a veteran unit. You'll learn about those later. So we move 1. I'm going to maneuver 1. I'm going to move 2. And I'm going to maneuver 2. I mean, that's my hope. The hope is that as these units are moving, that they can come across my line of fire. We'll see. And that's it. That's my turn. That's all I got to do. All right, now it's time for our enemies. The BF-109 is right here, and so it's the same thing. Like, what can we do here to make it interesting? Well, notice the advanced stats. Move 3, maneuver 2, attack is greater. Let's go 1, 2, 3... 1, 2, we'll do 2, and then we'll maneuver. There we go. And that's it. We could have We could have moved an extra, maneuvered extra, but we didn't. So there we go. We've lined ourselves up for a good shot. Then we have the BF-109s, and those we could, because we've got both of those, we could think of things to do that would be interesting. So let's do, now notice that these are out of comm range, so eventually I'm going to want to try and maneuver Hurricane 2 into comm range to avoid being out of comms. So R1, let's say we can move and attack. Well, we can't attack anything. We will though. So we're going to do this and maneuver. Look at that. Now we've got a head-on waiting to happen. Yay. And then we're going to do maneuver. We can move 3. I'm going to move 1, 2, maneuver, 2, maneuver, and stay. Look at that. We've got ourselves a tournament. And there we go. And that's it. That's the end of that round. And so what do? Well, we grab 4 more cards. And we do the same thing. We're vying for initiative. Now, the Germans would be really, really well served if they could get initiative. But they don't have... Notice the sadness here. They don't have a way to capitalize on this situation right now with the cards in their hand. They just don't. However, they can, yeah, they don't have a way to be able to do anything really awesome right now, and that's the risk. That's the risk of the card deck. Same thing here. Like we have, I mean, however, unbeknownst to the German player, we have a situation where we're now very focused on moving our Defiance, and our Hurricane over here can move, and this is a possibility we'll use. But yeah, you'll see here that this kind of gets left in stasis. Because if there were more cards for the BF-109s here in the deck, and we pulled those out, we could press home an advantage here by firing at those units. We're going to pretend now, because I'm not going to go over the whole game with you. I'm just trying to show an example of play. But let's say, for example, that... let's say I bid that. He bid this... Oh, looky, the Germans now have advantage. All right, so then it goes over here, and we go first. So this is what we can do. So because the section comms, this is kind of like I can guide, inspire, but I can't. So we're going to coordinate. Because they're in range, I can actually get rid of a discord card and draw a card. Oh, well. And so then I've done that, and now I can use my BF-109-2. You know what? We're going to pretend that this is a BF-109-1, okay? We're going to do a shooting sequence and just show you that. What happens is you start off by taking the target. First off, you check can you even fire on it? Yep, I can fire on it. This has, its defense is irrelevant. This defense is 5. Then you do a range. 5, so you go 5, 6, 7, 8. And if there was anything in between, then you would add more. So if there was a balloon, for example, out in the middle here, this island of misfit blimps, you would add more, etc. And again, like 8 is pretty risky right now. But then you look and go, well, what is my situation here? Let's pretend this is the same card. Actually, no, let's just grab the... Say we were fighting. We'd look and go, okay, my attack value is 2. That's 2 dice. But what's this 3? Well, if you get behind them, here, or if the here or here or here, if you can get them in the back, there's some rule sets, but generally speaking, if you're shooting behind them, and you have an angle that's behind them, you get 3 dice instead of 2, which can make a very big difference. In this case, it's head on, so there's no bonus. So you roll, so you got 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. Boom, it's a hit. All right, woo, we hit that. So what's the first thing we do? Well, over here, the enemy has to go, if you have to get rid of one of the cards out of the game. In this case, you start with your hand. If it's in your hand, you get rid of it. If it's in your discard pile, you get rid of it. If it's in your deck, you get rid of it. And if you don't have it in any of those 3 places, it is literally out of the game. It is neutralized, and all the cards that relate to it are out of the game. and the Luftwaffe basically has the first of their victory conditions met, and that's how it goes. There's other situations where it's not just, intrinsic defense. You've got your range, you've got anything in between, you've got cloud cover. If there's cloud cover anywhere, you add to that, which can make it a little even less possible. You've got bombing runs, so for some of your attack, and notice this one's behind you, so it has to be behind, or like it shoots behind, but it has to be over a given target, and then if it hits, it destroys it. I mean, it's all simple stuff, but you get the idea. This is how the game plays out. You've got the same fundamental flow of play of the Undaunted series, but there are a few notable changes that are fit specifically to accommodate the intricacies and differences of air combat versus ground combat. And that's what we have. So let's get into my final thoughts on Undaunted, Battle of Britain. Okay, final thoughts on Undaunted, Battle of Britain. As always, we go over the cons first, followed by the pros, followed by my final thoughts. We're going to take a quick look at the cons. The overall presentation, as with all of the Undaunted games in the series, is top-notch. We set that bar there. That said, there were some presentation aspects, nothing to do with like the artwork or the style, which I really enjoy. It's been consistently good quality stuff, but there are some aspects, information aspects, that didn't resonate as with me, things that caused some confusion that might not have ought to. One of them was the repurposing of the colors and letter designations for Luftwaffe and Battle of Britain, such that both sides had yellow, purple, gray, green, Y, G, B, J, and J. And that was more confusing than I really thought. I thought it would be okay. It ends up being okay if you just pay really good attention. But it was something that was kind of off-putting because, the first time you accidentally grab there isn't a clear distinction between the two opposing units in the same color with the same letter designation. They are marked. They are the background of the counters themselves, and they're teardropped because there is now direction as an aspect of play, which is really cool. The Luftwaffe, they're gray, and the RAF, they're kind of off-white. So I didn't. Yeah, that was something that I think that could have been maybe some way revisited. I mean, ultimately, I'm probably going to do what I always do with these, like for Normandy and North Africa. I blinged it out on Etsy. They had these great little units and stuff. So eventually, it's going to wash out for me because this is going to get played so much. I'm going to take everything away. But it was, and again, it's subtle, but it can be something that messes up. And when you do, you usually catch it in time. The other thing is, as a game that's in an entry-level series, which when it comes to like wargaming, the terms continue to be a little esoteric for new players. It takes a while for them to understand. Bolster is not a common term. I just think of it as reinforcing your units both for opportunity and hit points, really, kind of in that regard. It's loosely guided. Guide was a strange one. It's more, it's nudge. I get it. Guide, you get a little mini move out of it. Coordinate is kind of makes sense once you understand discord. Coordinate helps reduce discord. That actually makes sense. That yin yang resonates. I mean, there's nothing outlandish. It's just something to be familiar with as you're teaching the game to people that not everyone is that familiar. A cheat sheet would be nice. All of these games, all of the Undaunted series, I eventually either created one or there's one on BGG to grab just a quick cheat sheet to go, here's all the things you do so you don't have to pass the rule book around. The other thing is that there is a slight... the teaching of this is very simple. It was very great pains were taken to make this as easy and as streamlined and as simple as possible while still being entertaining. It's very clear. Like, that's kind of the hallmark of the Undaunted games. And this was clearly a full effort because of the way that the air combat differs from the combat, the ground and armor combat of games previous in this line of gaming. But it's funny, there's a slight, there's a great move and do, or do and move. That's what your options are when you look at the card. You have to move, and then you can do something, or you can do something, and then you have to move. And then maneuvering fits in the middle like this sneaky little squirrel. It's this, sort of I before E, except after C thing going on, where you have to be, okay, I'm teaching this, but okay, this is the hard and fast rule, except for this particular case. Again, thinking about teaching it to new players, going, okay, maneuver just kind of fits in the middle. It kind of like weaves together. The rest of it will all make sense to you. Blah, blah, blah. Bob's your uncle. There's no official solo mode. That's a no-go for this game, I believe, as Stalingrad. I'm totally fine with it, but just letting you know, if you came in with North Africa and Normandy and the reinforcements and weren't expecting the solo kind of fit in there, it won't. I think there's going to be no lack of unofficial variants. I think you can play this game solo. I've played it solo. I will play it solo. I can find ways to, the only hidden information is the cards, albeit important information like initiative. But there are ways to kind of just, do your best, get a little fuzzy logic and just kind of mess around with it and still have a good time. Not optimal, but still have a good time. And I understand why the designers did what they did, and they've even expressed this before. There's a big difference between, something that could be played solo and actually putting out an official solo, an official solo version of the game. When you say that you're going to put out an official solo game, this is the bar. When you put it on an official variant, these are the bars. And with that bar, I applaud that the designers go, if we can't hit this bar, let's not. Let's just focus on what makes the game the best. And I think that's the right choice in this case. Totally. I would like a digital version, though. Let's get on that. I still see Undaunted Normandy has been in early access for a long, long time. It's not as early as it used to be. I hope that actually comes happen. The biggest thing, and to quote my least favorite commercial that you have to understand going into this game, is that this game takes some creative liberty. It just does. It is not, and it's never been anything but unabashedly clear about reinforcing this. It is not a simulation. It is not there to recreate that battlefield on that day with those units and those rules with these planes and stuff. It doesn't mean it's not historically flavored. And in fact, I've read design notes, I've read, various documents in the past, they're reading up on it. They really immerse themselves in the history. So they're not coming at this, naively going, ah, ha, ha. So it's not like they're unaware of the circumstances when they're creating this. It's just that they're creating this for more cinematic and more entertainment purposes. They're not trying to simulate. I liken it to when I was young and I would watch, one of my favorite movies was The Guns of Navarone. Matter of fact, every year for Christmas, Sears catalog comes out in September, and I would beg my parents for the Guns of Navarone playset. It was the most expensive one, but I'm like, I wanted this one so bad, and I can tell you I never ever got it because it was always too expensive, but I still remember wanting it, and I guess that's good enough. And that's okay. Like, did I really need it? I don't know. My life would probably not be any different today with or without it. But at the same time, you watch the movie, and, it's not the same. No, Gregory Peck was not there at Navarone, which isn't even a real place. But I still got the fun vibe of that, the playset still would have worked for me. I didn't need it to have, like somebody, authoritative information telling me how I really should have simulated the movie. And so go into it with that. It's one of those, this is inspired by true events. It's not an autobiographical recreation of said events. That's the best way to go into these games, particularly this one. And now let's get into the pros. Anyone familiar with the Undaunted series will find both familiarity and contextually nuanced changes in the system, and they're very, very well done. I love that each of these games always has the first page. If you played previous ones, this is what's different, because that's literally the first question I'm going to have. It's like, why would I buy this and not the other ones? There must be some differences. Well, here they are. And so the biggest thing is hexes. But they don't devolve fully into hexes, because instead they do groupings of hexes, which is nice. This is a set of 5 hexes, put it down, slap it on. It keeps the simplicity of map setup intact. So it's not fully a hex encounter game per se. But it is there because it matters, because when, now that you have directional situations, it's a lot easier to figure that out than to use, offset rectangles. The cards are the same, except now they're split with the mandatory and optional. I like that they kept the same template. Didn't go too off the bat, and it makes sense. Planes don't just pull over to the side of the road to dodge fire. That's, it adds into it. The maneuvering aspects add precisely what you want the air combat should do in the system and no more, and that's important. Veteran designers, I think, oftentimes, and I've seen it in video games all my life as I've worked in this industry, like I've been doing video games since the 90s, and one of the things I find is that the sign of a veteran designer is that they're just as interested in what you don't put in a game as what you do, given the purpose of the game. What's the point of the game? Like, if it was a simulation, you'd want to throw it in. You do Crusader Kings 3, you want to throw everything in. If it's not, if it's for a given audience and a given style, and there's things you need to simplify, the key is being able to simplify without simplifying without stripping away. When you can simplify a system without robbing people of the core essence of the fun involved, you've won. I could tell elevation isn't part of this, and I know there's some backlash. I mean, even Top Gun, this $14 Funko game has elevation, but honestly, I don't think it's needed. I've seen other games that have punted on elevation, 303 Squadron, actually even Skies Over Britain. They just don't. They don't deal with it because it can become an encumbering force that takes away rather than adds to the Battle of Britain. So, yeah, totally fine. I'm glad that they did that choice. Combat itself, it's a nice balance of tension and agony, and modeling of the aircraft is well defined despite being incredibly simple. The Luftwaffe aircraft are fewer, mightier. The RAF aircraft vary tremendously. The extra introduction of the balloons, the anti-air, add much to the game without actually adding to the overhead of the game. You get real, there's a real tangible impact to each of the different scenarios and missions for what you have in them, and it's surprising how little terrain and whatever comes in and still packs a punch and makes the scenarios much more varied. We'll get into that later. The easy combat rules to determine hits. It's very elegant, it's very easy to understand, and yet it still provides the value you want from flanking and firing towards the rear of an aircraft or wherever the weak spots are. It's kind of funny, thinking that some of the aircraft, RAF aircraft, you don't face them. You can't fire at them from the nose, and it's like, oh yeah, that's right. So cohesion factor is well done. This is something that's sort of a more poignant way to represent what the other games in the series noted as scouting and fog of war. You don't leave your wingman, Mav, but it can happen. It has a strong impact on your thought process beyond just maneuvering for the best shot. It's like getting back in range so you don't have to wind up with more discord to kind of impede you. And again, there's an impressive variety in the scenarios and missions, despite not having to utilize wealth of terrain and pieces and set pieces to do that. They were able to craft some very clever representative mission objectives, adding in the right restrictions and obstacles in a way that entertains. And the missions are just the right length for me. They don't wear out their welcome. Really, really like it. So in short, or in long, Undaunted, Battle of Britain. What are my final thoughts? Undaunted games generally have had crowds of competitors that they meet at. I mean, finding a war game, with moving people on the map, there's a lot of games in that space, and the Undaunted series has found its niche there as a great on-ramp for new players, and then slowly over time matured or added more complexity to that. It's been an excellent, road, a delightful excursion for others. Field of contenders for Battle of Britain air games is equally, if not more so, filled and populated. There's plenty of games vying for this space and this topic. In the space of air combat games, everything from B-17, Queen of the Skies, to RAF, Target for Today, B-17, Flying Fortress Leader, Wing Leader, Wings of War, Rise of the Luftwaffe, Duel in the Dark. These are tons of games. And then topic-wise, you have 303 Squadron, which came out early year before this one. Which, interesting enough, is funny because it had similar situations where it had a generally standard set of actions to do, but then maneuver was always tricky to tell people and show. It was a trouble spot. Thankfully, Undaunted Battle of Britain is much more straightforward to show that exception, whereas 303, unfortunately, still boggled people's minds even after the rule rewrite, etc. And then, of course, Skies Over Britain, which is definitely much higher on the complexity scale and much more deeper and richer as far as like simulating the experience in a much more granular way. An Undaunted Battle of Britain isn't meant to simulate the Battle of Britain as much as it is to just experience the Battle of Britain as approachably and satisfyingly as possible, whether you're a grizzled, six-sided octogenarian resigned to have some simple fun, or a new and bright-eyed enlistee into the great hobby of light wargaming. Is it the best Battle of Britain game ever? I'd still give the nod to that, to 303 Squadron, warts and all, for its cinematic flavor, and I think it is probably my favorite cinematic one per se, just over this one still. But I can't deny that this is more approachable and fun and easier for people and far easier to teach. But my personal preference would be 303 because they really did model stuff after real people, real situations, and they still did it in an entertaining and you know, fun, frolicky fashion. Skies Over Britain is just on another plane of complexity and depth and brilliance entirely. And currently it rules the roost for that, but at a complexity cost. And it's, yeah. I mean, here's a plausible scenario. I mean, maybe this happens to you every other day, but I want to play Skies Over Britain. Here's where this could shine. I want to play Skies Over Britain, so I invite my best friend over and say, hey, do you want to play Skies Over Britain with me? And so I have him over there, I set it all up, I begin playing, I'm having a heck of a time, wonderful time, just, you know, really deep and into it, and I'm, you know, and my friend's not, and I'm not wondering why, and I'm like, what's the problem? Are you not enjoying this? And he's like, well, I'd like to play too, and I'm like, you can't, it's a one-player game. And so then he might ask, well, can we play something with two players that also features the Battle of Britain, but in an easy and approachable way, so that I can have fun instead of just you? And, well, there you go. Mission accomplished. So I'm sure that scenario happens all the time. But in all seriousness, you know, it might not be the grail, the grandiose, the game. It might, but it certainly does what it sets out to do in many, many ways. I mean, honestly, it slides onto the bench next to the big hitters and quietly bats 294 in cleanup while high-fiving everyone like a good teammate. That's what it is. It's probably my second favorite in the Undaunted series, surprisingly, behind the original Undaunted Normandy, which I still consider the favorite one for me to pull out. And while I have great respect for Stalingrad, I do. Like, it's a masterpiece in its own right, but I like the new direction here, and I like what's been done here, and it's more of an open opportunity to show this game and get it played for people since it's unencumbered by a sterling but commitment required campaign like Stalingrad. But I'm happy with the purchase. I'm glad. Again, David Thompson and Trevor Benjamin. I can't wait for whatever they've got next. Will it be ships? Will it be outer space? Undaunted, kids clean up your room? I don't know. But anyway, thanks again, and we'll see you next time on Harebrained Games.